Everybody ready? Okay, let's do this. We are here for, is it UMET, is that correct? UMET annual exercise using drones for situation awareness in emergency response. We have 3 speakers. I'm just going to read their bios here. Talsen Schultzka, right? Did I say it right? Is from Murray City. He's a GIS analyst. Senior GIS analyst, where he works with departments throughout the city to provide geospatial solutions aimed at improving services and productivity. This includes areas such as public works, community and economic development, and public safety. Before Murray City, Talsen spent 6 years with Unified Fire Authority and Salt Lake County Emergency Management as a GIS specialist and the strategic data manager. During that time, he also learned about the UMET, or the Utah Mapping Emergency Technical Team, and promptly became a member. Talsen has served as the chair of UMET since 2016, where he has worked closely with the coordinating board in develop UMET's response team and the associated training cadre. He continues to stay active in public safety, working with Murray City Fire and as a member of Utah Task Force 1, which is one of the 28 teams that make up FEMA's National Urban Search and Rescue Response Team. And then we have Josh Gronavald. Yeah. Yes. Josh Gronavald is the GIS coordinator for UMET, or for the Utah Division of Emergency Management, a position he has held for the past 11 years. He is a member of the Utah Mapping Emergency Technical Team and serves on the National States Geographic Information Council Geospatial Preparedness Committee. He has previously served on the UGIC board. He holds a master's degree in geography from the University of Utah and a bachelor's degree in geography from Western Michigan University. And then last but not least, we have Kate. I just spastic clicked off your bio. Kate spent 8 years at Salt Lake County Emergency Management Unified Fire Authority as a GIS specialist and mitigation planner. She has also taught spatial analysis at Salt Lake Community College. She previously served as a member of the UGIC board and the UGIC Education Committee for GIS Day. In 2013, she helped establish the Utah Mapping Emergency Technical Team, a UGIC committee focused on best practices for GIS support for emergency response, and currently serves as the on the UMET coordinating board. Kate has a BS in geography from BYU and an MS in geography from University of Utah. Thanks for being here. All right.
Thank you very much. Okay, I hope everyone's alert and ready to engage with us this morning. So again, my name's Kate Smith. I'm going to kind of give you some background. We have quite a few people here who have attended one of our sessions before, but I'm going to kind of start from the beginning just to make sure everyone's on the same page on who we are and what our intent here is. So UMET is the Utah Mapping Emergency Technical Team. We are a committee under the umbrella of UGIC. This is our mission statement. UMET is a partnership of government and private geospatial professionals with a mission of providing cross-jurisdictional professional mapping services and data in support of decision-making during emergency response and mitigation in Utah. And kind of the origin story of UMET is, while I was working at Unified Fire Authority, I was just a lone person. There was no GIS department. There was me. And thinking about, if there was some sort of large-scale disaster to hit Salt Lake County, that would be more tasks than I would be able to keep up with. Later met Josh, who was kind of in a similar capacity up at the state level, and just looking for ways that we could facilitate collaboration between other city GIS users or county or state GIS users who maybe don't do emergency response day in and day out, but potentially could face a situation where something happens in your city, and that with some of our experience with emergency response and emergency management, we could help make sure the general GIS usership would have a familiarity that would make it easier for you to be able to step into that role if something were to happen in your local jurisdiction. So UMet unites GIS with emergency management. Things were looking pretty grim until UMet arrived. So kind of the goals of our group, we have meetings quarterly just with anyone who's interested in attending, basically. We share best practices, lessons learned. We don't have tons of huge emergency response incidents in Utah, but they happen regularly enough that usually at just about every meeting we're able to find someone within our network of GIS users that has had something happen recently that they are able to present. How did they use GIS to support their emergency responders? What went well? What did not go well? What tools did they use that were useful? And share that with one another just to make sure we all have kind of some familiarity with how things might work in that situation. We talk about what are the essential data sets or other tools that would be useful to you. We work on helping you build relationships with your local emergency managers so they know who you are in advance and would know that they can come to you for information, for data, for maps, for analysis, whatever they might need. We try to look for appropriate training. Some of that we do here at the conference, trying to give you some hands-on experience with a tool that might be useful in an emergency response. Also talking about how we can better coordinate in an emergency situation if it's not confined just to one city. If there's multiple cities or county or state agencies involved, how can we better coordinate with one another in that sort of situation? And then lastly, we are working to establish a volunteer group that having some basic training in incident command system, which is a course that we taught on Monday and we try to do each year at the conference. So if anyone's interested, be looking for that in the future. But having that basic information about the incident command system, helping to interface a little bit better with the structure used by emergency responders. And we appreciated, was it Jared Nelson, who spoke in the plenary yesterday, made a nice plug for having an understanding that, you know, that's not his typical role, but that's something that he saw as a useful takeaway from the experiences they had of having that basic understanding of ICS, incident action plans, things along those lines. So we appreciated his unsolicited support of that idea. So the UMet response team being one of those kind of key goals of the overall group, we've been working on developing procedures that we could utilize to train other GIS professionals that could then offer additional support. So if you are a one-person shop in your city and something were to happen that would be perhaps a little too overwhelming, or if it's going into multiple days, to prevent burnout, we would have a group of volunteers who could potentially come and offer additional assistance to you. And so we have, that's part of the training we offer before the conference as well, is just understanding how that group would operate, how the emergency managers can request that assistance, and how we send that out to our members. It's not something that's, you know, it's strictly voluntary. So if you decided to join that group, you would always decide when and where you would be willing to participate. There's no, you don't have to be a ongoing member of UMet to receive that sort of assistance. So just to be aware that that exists. If any of you find yourself in that situation, you can think of us. But that group would be available to provide maps, data, other support to emergency responders in all types of hazards and incidents. And so that could be either in a localized city, as I was saying, that just needs some additional support, or if it's larger and involving multiple jurisdictions, could work in any of those situations. So I mentioned that we have the training, but all of our documentation of that training is also on the UJIC website. So ujic.org/UMet has our standard operating guide that kind of elaborates how that process of requesting help and so forth goes. trying to work on ways we can build kind of a system of resources that would be kind of a reference guide or standardized GIS products that could be used in that situation. And just in general, working to clarify responsibilities and expectations for GIS personnel and trying to help bridge that gap between GIS users and emergency management so that they understand who you are, what your capabilities are, and also for us as a GIS community, understand a little bit better of what their needs are and be working to collaborate with them better to be able to provide information for them as decision makers. And initially, I think our goal was try not to suck. We're trying to put a positive spin on that, just to be a really useful resource is what we aim. So I'm going to pass some time over to Josh and talk a little bit more about what we're going to do today.
All right. Well, good morning, everyone. So I'm Josh Gronavald. I'm the GIS manager for the State Division of Emergency Management. Typically, when we've held this session in previous conferences, we've framed it around some sort of a disaster scenario. This is not like a FEMA type exercise, so if any of you have participated in a FEMA exercise in your jurisdiction, this is not that formal. But it's been helpful in previous iterations of this to kind of frame the way that we could respond as GIS professionals around some sort of an emergency event. Obviously the focus of our overall session today is using drones to process imagery in the immediacy of an incident. In previous years, we've talked about hazards like earthquakes and hazmat spills and wildfires, winter storms, I think we did once. So one of the ones that's kind of left on the table that we haven't really talked about yet is flooding. And I thought that would be particularly relevant to capturing drone imagery just because, at least with many of the flood events we've had in Utah, the flood happens very quickly, and if you want to capture something while the water is high, a drone type response might lend itself well to that. I had considered naming this part of this session Josh Reminisces About Olden Times, because I feel like that's kind of what I dug into the Wayback Machine and found some fairly embarrassing maps from when I first started with the state. So hopefully over the course of your career you can see a positive progression of bettering of your maps. When I first started for the state, I had just finished my master's degree, and that was in 2011. In 2011, we had flooding through most of the state, particularly in northern Utah, and I made this masterpiece, which will win me no awards ever. But the snowpack was massively high that year, and so we had, I think the presidential declaration had an incident response period from like April to June or July. Like, it was this very extensive period because there was so much snowpack that I think I was making one of these like a week to share with some of our FEMA folks, and it was just that we didn't have a formalized process for gathering damage data. It was just like emails from people, which is a great way to capture data that's not really data. So trying to locate any of these things, not being from Utah and not knowing where a lot of this stuff was. So in this particular event, it was a fairly prolonged period of flooding. But if any of you are familiar with Brian McInerney, who recently retired from the National Weather Service, he had described this as an event where the snowmelt happened in a fairly orderly fashion. We were certainly at a risk that if we went from being very cold to summertime heat very rapidly, that it could have caused a lot more damage than it did. The following year, down in Santa Clara, we had some flooding. There was a storm that went through, and the little what I don't know whether you call it a dam, a dike, a retention basin, a something breached. Yeah, it was this earthen dam thing, and when that happened, we got some reports of flooding, but all we had was a handful of addresses. So I had this brilliant idea of finding where those addresses were and then putting a circle around it to say, well, the flooding was here, sort of, somewhere. This was a great experience in learning that it's completely useless to put a disclaimer on a map because nobody read it, and they all assumed that this was like authoritative data, and that was not the case. But I bring this up as an example to say that particularly when you're in any sort of an emergency response, the information you get in the immediacy of something happening is unclear, and it's not a lot to work with. And so sometimes the first few maps that you make will look kind of rough, but hopefully they can be useful. Tolson, I think, will talk a bit more about these maps. Tolson was actively involved in the flash flood that happened down in Hilldale in 2015. I'll let him talk about that in a bit. But Tolson had a couple of maps of the search area where they were trying to find and recover some of the victims from that event.
Can you see if the lights can be, for these images, if the lights can be adjusted? 'Cause I don't.
Oh, does it go next door?
No, I think the lights should be fairly independent.
Sorry. I mean,
They're not.
can you see those?
Oh, well,
Our classroom had a nice little strobe light for a second.
cool. That's an unexpected little benefit of doing all of this. All right. This is great for all of our friends online where they don't need to see me. But this was an event that happened fairly rapidly, and in terms of trying to capture some of the imagery, Tolson can talk about that more in a bit. But if you don't get some sort of imagery while it's happening or very quickly thereafter, you kind of miss your chance. And so I think that's why the focus of our talk today in terms of capturing drone imagery is a fairly relevant topic. I've only got a couple of more incident examples before we can pass it on to Tolson to get into the part of the show that you're actually here to see. Some of you might have remembered in 2017 there was flooding in Box Elder and Cache County. I know Jake's here. Jake was with Cache County at the time. And that was an interesting event because this was one of the first events that I was at the state where both Box Elder and Cache County were putting publicly available maps to show damage data, which was fantastic. It was a bit of a challenge to try to compile that into one map from a state level. But there was a lot of damage from that flooding event. Even though it only impacted a couple of counties, we still did get a presidential declaration from that, and I thought that was a really great use of GIS as a tool. But I wasn't really coordinating any sort of like imagery capture with anyone at the local level. And I don't know the extent to which anything may or may not have happened, and so there was kind of this a lack of clarity in terms of what was happening. We kind of knew where the damages were because they were being mapped, but it was still a challenge to know how substantial any of those damages actually were. This one is not mine. This one is a map from the USGS following the Dollar Ridge fire that Jared, I think was his name, talked about in the plenary session yesterday. The debris flows that happened after this event, I don't know if you could call them floods. I think we've kind of wrapped them under a loose flood term. But the group from USGS that does the debris flow hazard maps after large wildfires. They've got several different components that they're looking at in terms of what the hazard is if water were to fall on the burn scar, as well as the probability of that actually happening. One of the challenges we've had at the state looking at this is that the analysis that they do typically is limited to the burn scar itself. And some of the folks in our office that are involved with floodplain mapping are much more interested in the downstream effects of any communities that are underneath the burn scar, and usually the debris flow potential doesn't extend past the burn area, but that's certainly something that we're well aware of. So I bring up all of these events just under this kind of loose scenario of if we were involved in some sort of a flooding event, if that happened in your jurisdiction, you have a fairly narrow window of trying to capture those images. I don't know if any of you remember in Salt Lake City in like 2017, we had like a day where there was some flooding. East High School got flooded and a few other spots. I only knew about that because I was going to work and I had to get off the tracks train at one stop and get on a bus because the tracks had been flooded, and the bus that I was on went through a fairly large puddle of water on the way to the next place. But by the end of the day, the water was like gone, and so if you didn't get the images of the flooding within a span of a couple hours, you might have missed your opportunity to actually see where the high water marks were. Certainly in the places that got damaged, it was a little easier to see where the damages happened, but generally in a flood scenario, a lot of times we're trying to see like where'd the water go, whether it was an inch deep or a foot deep or several feet deep. Just we're looking at trying to get a polygon of where the water went, and that's not as easy to come up with. In a wildfire event, it's a little easier to say, here is the fire. In an earthquake, you get the USGS shake map that says here's where the shaking was and here's where the epicenter was. But flooding tends to be a bit trickier, at least in the West, where we get more of the flash flooding events. If you go into like the Midwest and the East Coast, where you get more of the riverine flooding, where you get a slow rise of the river, like that is a little bit easier to work with in terms of trying to capture the extent of where the water goes. But in the context of what we see more frequently in Utah, it's a fairly narrow window to capture any sort of post-event imagery. So those were all of the scenarios that I kind of wanted to walk you through, and I think at this time we'll turn it over to Tulson to talk about using drones to capture imagery.
There you go.
All right. How's everyone doing? Good. I was going to ask who's hungover, but they're probably the ones watching online. So in the spirit of, I think Kate mentioned this, but if not, this doubles, this meeting here, and it has each year for the last several UGICs, this meeting doubles as our quarterly meeting. And how many of you have been to one of our quarterly meetings, a UMEC quarterly meeting? There's just a handful, right? So lots of new faces. I just wanted to take a moment to say, and those of you, who have been to our quarterly meetings, that it's a very interactive get-together. I would like for this to be the same. So if you have questions, comments, suggestions, because heaven knows I'm not an expert on drones or the image processing. This is kind of like what my experience was learning, and we were actually talking yesterday about how this is kind of reality. I ran into a lot of snags, which I'll talk about, but that's kind of the reality of emergency management, emergency response, and how we support EM. Things come up. One of you said that, like, right? Things just kind of come up and happen. So again, please feel free to make this interactive. Let's talk as we go. All right, good deal. So Josh had mentioned that, back in 2015, I responded with an incident management team that went down to Hilldale to help with the response to the flood there. And we were able to obtain some imagery there, but it came about in a very unexpected way. Basically, the Utah National Guard, and this isn't like being broadcast. No, I'm just kidding. The Utah National Guard, they kind of maybe said, what red tape? And they had a drone on their or in their cache, and they actually, I guess they were communicating with certain individuals, and they had been asked if they could fly some areas. So what I wanted to show you to start out with is what they captured and acquired. And if you look closely, obviously lots of mud, lots of debris, but as I scroll through these, you can see this one we'll look at more closely in a little bit, but the landscape was changed dramatically. Again, that particular spot there, you can see the people standing at the top of the ridge, canyon. I don't know what you call it when Mother Nature does that so quickly, but here, what's the difference on this one? Yeah, this is an oblique, right? Obliques can be useful, but not when you're trying to, do aerial images that are used in a flat map in ArcGIS, which is exactly what happened. They collected these images. Here's another one that it's like, that paints a really good picture for certain things, but not for mapping. And so what happened was they collected these without consulting anyone with technical expertise or anyone with GIS knowledge, and they just went out and flew. Then, after the fact, I think it kind of, became taboo almost, like we flew, but we didn't fly. We didn't really fly. I'm guessing that if you guys have been involved with drones in your jurisdictions in any way, that you've also probably run into like some hesitancy, right? How many of you like lawyers? I have like a lot of lawyers in my extended family, and we love them. But yeah, they get concerns and they kind of make things difficult, and that's exactly what happened. We weren't going to be allowed to go out and refly this. So it was like, hey, look at all this imagery, look at all this stuff we got here. And I was like, what do you want me to do with this? Well, that's the nature of emergencies, right? And the support. So this was a really good learning experience. I'll scroll through these a little bit. Just again, you can see that some of them are pretty close to 90 degrees. Some of them are just a little off. Some of them are spot on. That looks like a straight down ortho photo, right? And so having this to work with, I'll show you kind of what it translated to. Now again, there's a good, how many? I think this slideshow just kind of picked the best ones, but there were probably close to 100 images. So there's a couple things at play there. One is the time it would take to georeference 100 individual images. The other is all the overlap that you would get from these. And so what I had to figure out was how do I get a nice like stitched image that I can georeference. Now, there are probably many of you out there who have either done this or you know where you would go. I honestly didn't know exactly where to go, so I did some quick research and ended up finding a program from Microsoft called Image Composite Editor. How many of you have ever heard of that? Yeah, it's like this, it almost felt like this, godsend kind of thing, like in the moment, because I hadn't heard of it either, but what it did was pretty incredible. Either from video or from images, you can, and I'm not going to actually grab them right now because, I just won't. But I might have an existing. No, never mind. I thought I did. But basically, you grab these images, and this ICE, whatever, and it was free too. That was also a huge bonus. It basically runs, its algorithms, does its thing, and stitches these photos together as best it can. And then it was up to me to georeference them. But you saw kind of what I was handed, and let me show you what came out of that, because that's really so the other tricky part with this was that they weren't really, they were given a little bit of direction, but had they come to a GIS person, or even someone more in IT, we could have planned better how to fly this and where. And like I said, once it came out that they had flown, it was suddenly like, what drone? We didn't fly anything. But under the radar, we were like, okay, we will process. What's done is done. We might as well do what we can with what we've got. But there were all kinds of liability, and actually a lot was privacy concerns. If you're familiar with the Hilldale and Colorado City community, and some of their history, they're very private people. All right, that's maybe an understatement, but yeah, there was a lot of concern about what would they be thinking and feeling about this, legal or not. It's just respectful, right? It's just common courtesy that you would consider the community that you're trying to help and aid, what their feelings, especially in such a horrible time and moment as that following the tragedy. So we used what we got, and you can see that it was sort of piecemeal, right? They flew a little bit here, they flew a little bit there. I think they were given some direction. I'll kind of show you what as we zoom in. The image underneath, by the way, we obtained from them. It's actually really good imagery. It probably was from around 2012-ish or so. It was only a couple of years old. As you zoom in, you can see that, yes, the wash is just sand, and apparently they have a lot of fun out there too, right? You can see the donuts and everything. So that's what it looked like, and then this is what it ended up like. And so I believe, oh, you know what? Let me do this just to make this a lot easier. So that's what it looked like. This is just a very shallow bridge, I guess. It's just a bunch of culverts, and then you can see flowing down in this direction, westward, all the debris that just jammed and clogged up these culverts. And here's the heavy equipment that by that point was trying to clear out. And there was still a little bit of water trickling after the fact, still some some flow coming down. So they opened up a small channel here and worked on continuing that debris removal. But again, from that to that, that's one example. One of the things I'll just point out, but you'll see how it got trickier for certain areas. This is probably one of the better ones that I had to work with. You can see that georeferencing something like this stitched up sort of, it's like a Frankenstein. Trying to georeference that, there's not a lot of like places to put your control points. I kind of had to use edge of the road type thing. In some spots I used trees. I know that's probably a horrible practice, right? I mean, they're fairly constant, but with the leaves on, how do you know that you're clicking the actual base or the trunk of the tree, right? So this one was probably one of the better ones. It lined up fairly nicely, but as we go up the wash a little further, there's not much difference to see there. As we go up the wash, you can see that here's a good example of, this was a pond. I don't even have to turn the layer off, but just so you can see kind of the shape and what happened to it, that essentially filled, hey, come back. That essentially filled with muck and debris and started to overflow out into here, which again, you can kind of see the shape of it lending itself to that. Down here is a pretty stark one. A couple of trucks parked here on the aerial, and you might see it flashing already, but there used to be a bridge there, and it used to be really narrow, what actually would come through in terms of flow, and that took it out and widened it significantly. So there was that. But again, I can remember, trying to georeference off of as many landmarks as I could find that would work within, this misshapen, and because it's all in a wash, there aren't roads, and for that matter, if you saw pictures, some of those roads did get washed out and destroyed. So there's just not a lot to work with, but again, we did what we could. You'll see how up here, now you remember that that area that was carved out and people on the edge of the ridge? Here are those people. Frankly, that image composite editor from Microsoft was incredible. It did such a good job of taking some of those obliques and sort of altering them to make them as ortho as possible. So again, here are those people, and here's that ravine or whatever you would call it at this point. Everything kind of this tree stayed standing. Must have, it's a big tree obviously, but it must have had really good roots and really deep roots because everything sort of swirled and washed out around it. This one is kind of the one I wanted to show you a few different like takes or angles on it. If we go over to, yeah, this one. So this, here's the road in 2008, okay? You can see it's just dirt on either side, and here's probably, that's that tree right there. Maybe that one. I didn't quite figure it out. But you can see that it's just kind of this little shallow growth of trees here. We look at 2009, a year later, same thing. Again, I think that's the tree that stayed. Go ahead to 2014, so about a year beforehand, it looks like they started recognizing like a path of the flow, and they put down some concrete. I don't know if you could see, those other ones didn't have anything like this. There's some fences here, so it looks like they had some idea of what the water was starting to do or where it wanted to go. And then when you look at 2021, they've actually had to engineer, because of everything that happened there. Here's all the carved out, right, landscape. There's our old friend. But they actually had to design, and here's a nice new road paved for that section. As we go up here, you'll see that they did design and engineered a path under the road for that to flow through. Once again, if we look at this section going backwards, here's what it looked like in 2014. So again, I think they saw that the water was doing this and coming across the road, but prior to that, it was nothing. I mean, you go back 5-6 years, and there was not much of a sign of anything. So kind of interesting how there were indicators of what, could come. I'm not saying that's a predictor. I'm just, pointing out how dramatic the landscape change was from that to this, right? So yeah, a lot of damage done, but like I said, in terms of, the georeferencing, this rock wall here was a good point of reference, but you can see that not everything's lining up super nicely. It, again, almost couldn't have asked for anything better from a free program, but B, with what it had to work with, all those obliques that you saw. So in the end, this is what we were able to kind of come up with. It was helpful. I wouldn't by any means call it mission critical, but as far as documenting, changes in the landscape and just documenting what it looked like, again, going back to what Josh said, this stuff happens so fast. I mean, if they had, after life safety was taken care of, when the waters were still flowing, once life safety was taken care of, if they really wanted to, they could have gotten, if you have that kind of a, program or plan in place, you could have gotten some drones up in the air and started videoing from the air the flow. That would be really nice. I don't know that any news helicopters ever made it down there. I'm not sure. Do you know? I don't think they did. It's quite a trip, but since they're mostly on the Wasatch Front. But at any rate, yeah. So that was the Hilldale, and what I wanted to illustrate is kind of, this is, for context, this is sort of the before, if you will, right? This is what, in the early stages of drones and people thinking about, hey, we could fly some imagery from this. This is what we sort of came up with in response. And since then, we now have products like Drone to Map. Now, how many of you have used Drone to Map? Okay, so just, well, sorry, did you, Sean, did you say something? Oh, I thought someone said something. So, very few, like a couple, maybe. So, Drone to Map, let's navigate over to that. What I'll show you here is, so Murray City, we do have a Drone to Map license, and up until, you know, about a year ago or so, flights were being flown, and then lawyers. No, no, it was going all right, but yeah, some gaps in the policy were sort of discovered or pointed out, and then the lawyers, you know, got concerned about that. So it's on hold in terms of flying, but you know, we maintain the license and are looking at you know, revamping or bringing that program back and flying again. Where very few of you have used this, I think it's you know, it's appropriate to take a minute to kind of talk through and show you, since this isn't rehashing stuff that you're like, yeah, I've done this 50 times. Those of you who raised your hand, sorry. You've done it 100 times. Okay, so Drone to Map basically takes those aerial images, even the ones I found, which I'll get to, even the ones that aren't the highest quality, it takes those images and it processes them using, I'm sure, a lot of the like metadata that's attached to those photos to generate, well, basically to stitch them together for one, and to generate these orthomosaics. So they've got a few different options here, and the way they explain the 2D rapid is you get some 2D products and the processing happens a lot quicker. It's quick enough that I'm going to really fast give this a, so this is UMet exercise 2022, and we're going to, so you basically, much like Arc Pro, you kind of, everything's organized as like projects. So you give your project a name. It defaults to this, you know, installation folder that has the projects, which for our purposes is fine, but obviously you can go, you can put or direct that wherever you want. And then you can either add images individually and grab them from different locations, but chances are that's usually in a folder. You can also add folder. I'm gonna just go ahead and do it this way and go into here. Oh, I'm sorry, it's this way. So here's sample data for 2D rapid. This is an asphalt plant or yard, and I'm just going to select all of those, hit OK. It adds them to this list, and then it also kind of validates that, yeah, I'm good with this file format, and everything seems to be in order. I've got lat, long, and of course altitude. I've got Z values here. So if it likes the way it looks, you get a check mark. And then you click create, and again, we're on the rapid, so this, I think it's like 30 seconds or less for this initial portion. Now, it took me a few tries to kind of figure out what, with the help of like an Esri tutorial, what next, because when this finishes, what you get is that. And you're like, wow, where's the imagery? Like, what is this? So what I came to find was, okay, I've got enabled, disabled. This is kind of that green check mark, right? All of our photos were good. If we wanted, I guess we could bring in ones that weren't agreeable. I haven't encountered this situation yet, so I don't know if it allows that, but evidently you would think it would because of this. I think the other possibility here, again, if anyone knows otherwise, feel free to like chime in, but this might be if you had a photo in there that it met all the requirements, but you looked at it individually and you said, oh, that one, yeah, I'm not so sure about. And I don't know if you'd retake it or what you would do, but you know, you might be able to just change the attribute to disable that, which in theory would mean that when you come to your flight data, here's that images table. So very similar to what we looked at. It's got all this really good info in here. And again, I believe from here you could, is there an enabled, disabled? Yeah, true, false.
You select it from the attribute from the table there.
Yeah.
And you hit the disabled images up in the ribbon.
And what is it for?
So it just doesn't use it in the processing.
Okay.
So I've had processing fail before and tell me which image was bad, and then I go back and disable it, and then it works.
And then you could, okay, so it does prevent the overall product generation, right?
It errors out.
Okay, awesome, thank you. That's, see, I hadn't encountered it yet, so I didn't know. Thank you for sharing. That's what this group is really about, is, you know, let's share best practices, share what we know, so that when disaster hits your community, jurisdiction, whatever, and you're supporting, you know, hopefully some of these ideas and tips come, you know, flooding back to your memory. Sorry. I'm a dad, okay? What do you expect? All right, so, no, that really is helpful, thank you. With this in place, what we can do is now, from the Home tab, we can kind of go and check our options, and this is what the tutorials had me do. This resolution, I actually don't know what GSD is, but I know that the tutorial said the higher this number, the lower the resolution. You know, I'm glad they keep things really intuitive. Sorry, whoever's here from Esri. But you can see that it's going to create this orthomosaic. It's also going to create a digital surface model and a DTM. So you get those products. This is sort of the overview of options where you could fine-tune anything that you want. We'll leave the defaults, and we will come into this processing. It's not a tab down here. What is this? An area? What do they call these? Ribbon. Yeah, thank you. And we're going to hit start. And again, because we're on the rapid, we can do this while we sit and wait and watch and talk. But in the meantime, while that's processing, let me just kind of show you the, you know, the nice canned presentation results. Here's the rapid. Now, what I did was I zoomed in on some heavy equipment. There's a dump truck and a bulldozer, and you can see this plant. There's some piles here of rocks, whatever they're processing here for asphalt. But like I said, I kind of wanted to see when I zoom in to about 1 to 100, that's what it looks like. Okay, you know, I can tell what they are, but if we ran this, I think this is still running. Yeah. If we ran it on the full, where that GSD value is 1 times GSD, that full resolution ends up looking like this. So it's quite a bit better. You can make out, you know, shapes on the hood of the truck. You can make out some of the finer, like, details and pieces of the dozer. So it gets better. Now, the other thing that you probably saw in the list when we first launched, I'll just launch one again really quick. But when we first launched Drone to Map, there's the 3D mapping. And what I do really like about this, and what I'm thoroughly impressed, I'll be honest, that from, you know, these 2D images and the info that they've gathered, they are generating and able to generate 3D products from it. I think that's pretty cool, personally. So with the 3D mapping option, let me expand that, there we go. You get 3D PDF, a point cloud, and a textured mesh. So I'm not going to process that because it does take quite a bit more time, but let's look at the, where'd it go? There. The outcome. Really not bad, right? I mean, it's it's kind of like, I don't know, something out of the multiverse of madness, maybe, but it's not too bad. You can tell that you're looking at some heavy equipment, right? I can zoom in out. You can see the ramp coming down into the pit. These piles are also three-dimensional. So for my part, this is incredible. That if you have fairly decent quality 2D imagery captured with your drone, you can generate these information products. I think it's great. I didn't get into much of the sharing, but again, you can sort of see and feel the ARC Pro-ness of this, and how it integrates and shares really nicely with ArcGIS Online. So again, that's the 3D product. Let's see if this has finished. It's almost there. So again, in the time, this is just the rapid. It's not high res. You saw what it ends up looking like. But I want to point out that, okay, that's the that's zoomed in 1 to 100. If I'm just trying to get a quick overview and I don't want to spend, you know, an hour or however long it obviously depends on how much area you're trying to process and cover, but if you need it as quickly as possible, this rapid gives you a pretty decent picture if you're not needing that, like, you know, zoomed in level of detail on the resolution, because you can make out plenty from here, right? In terms of 2D. I'll turn off these imagery products just to showcase the digital elevation products. So the surface model you see there, and then if I turn that off, here's the terrain model. So I'll just kind of, let me pull that one back up just so you can see some of what's going on there.
Do you have to have your drone set to a certain setting to be able to get all these additional?
No, I don't believe you do. And I couldn't find a lot of documentation because that's a really good question, Sean. I don't know if I have to, sorry, if I'm supposed to be repeating questions. Yeah, so for those of you watching online, the question was, do you have to have certain settings or parameters on your drone for the imagery that you're capturing? The short answer that I'm aware of is no. Everything that the tutorials, hinted at was that these are just as is, how they were collected in the field. So every piece of information that the drone is capturing is sufficient for drone to map to take and interpret and create these products. That said, I had a similar question in my mind and couldn't find documentation saying here are the specs for the imagery. And so it's a little hard to say. Now, all of that taken into consideration, I wanted to test this out, right? Now, we're grounded at Murray. We have a really nice drone. I want to see where this is at. Uh-oh. Presentation error. Okay, it's still thinking. We'll let it think. In the meantime, let me minimize some of this. In the meantime, let me show you what Murray City has. So this is the new City Hall site. It's 4800 South, and State Street is just over here to the east. This is what that maybe used to look like. It's thinking. Oh, no, it's not. It's telling me to think and use my brain. So City Hall site, this is what it used to look like. There were several buildings there. You can see that some imagery that was captured. Off the top of my head, I don't know. Matt, do you know roughly when this would have been flown?
Probably about a year and a half ago.
Okay, so 18 months ago, this is what it looked like. If any of you have driven by there or are familiar with the area, you know that it looks a lot different now. It's one of the reasons that it would be nice if we could go and fly it, but we can't at the moment. However, what I want to point out is this is done. The Esri tutorial data didn't really tell me what drone was used to capture the imagery. It just said, this imagery has been captured. Now you've been asked to, create orthomosaics with it, et cetera, et cetera. This one I can tell you is a matrice, but model number, Matt, can you help me out? Is it maybe a 200? Does that? I think it's a 200. So it's a matrice 200. It's a big drone. If you've seen them, it's got like the long stork legs kind of on it, and it's a quadcopter. But this is what it took. Now from here, you maybe can't appreciate the level of detail. So this is a 1 to 1,000. Here's 1 to 500. We'll give it a second. It's fairly large to render, and I had the bookmarks set up because I thought it would help and make things go faster. It's not so far. Let's try 250. Yeah, maybe not. May have to come back to that. Okay, so this one, it finished processing. Again, while it's doing some of these additional tools, running some of these tools, you can see this is our, pixelated when we get zoomed in really tight. But again, that was what, 10 minutes, 15 at the most, and we get this product out of it. So, if you're covering a wider area, it's obviously going to take more time, but compared to the time it takes to wait for or to schedule or to purchase, aerial imagery, right? This is, it's night and day to be able to get something like this quickly. So what I wanted to illustrate, again, not knowing what the apparatus was that was used to capture this imagery, what I really wanted to illustrate, and it's not cooperating, is the matrice and just the elevation that it was, the altitude that it was flown at. That we got really, really high res detail. And in terms of the emergency management piece, that can be very significant, that level of detail. To sort of illustrate that a little bit further, and hopefully these ones are more cooperative, but I went earlier this week and flew outside of the airport buffer. I was responsible, and I drove out to Mazer, kind of just barely northwest of here, and I wanted to try this out. Now, I told you that Murray's drone is grounded, so I grabbed my little Mavic Mini. Any of you have your own personal drone? Yeah. So maybe not the Mini, but you guys are probably familiar with it. It's kind of nice because it's right under the weight threshold for having to register it. So I've chosen to not register mine because then they can never tie it back to me. And they're headed that direction. I'm just gonna put this out there, but the FAA is kind of moving toward all drones will be registered, and it's going to be, what's that? Yeah. Do you want to just explain? Since you know the name, I know you know a little bit about it.
So every drone is going to be required to report its model number, if it's got a registration number, if it doesn't, and the owner, so that anybody who needs to or wants to can have a device that picks up that signal so they can see who has the drone.
Exactly. Yep. So just in brief, again, for online, if that didn't come through, all drones will have to be registered, and that's going to include model number and everything about that, including things like when you power up that drone, that is going to be known to the FAA, everything. So good old Big Brother is out there. No, I don't have mine registered. That's just a choice I made. It's not trying to hide anything, but I can legally fly it, and so I did. I went out and I flew. Now, this was very experimental. A lot of times, and I've never flown the Matrice, the Murray City's drone. Matt has, and I totally lost my train of thought. I'm sorry. It's experimental, so I didn't know what to expect and how to like do the flight planning. On the Matrice, there's basically built-in flight planning where you can do, the draw the box and it's going to calculate everything for you. Mavic Mini, not so much. So there are some third-party apps that are available. I did a little bit of research and landed on one that I think is pronounced Litchi, but Litchi, and it's a third-party app that frankly unlocks a lot of capabilities on your drone. When I use the native DJI Fly app, it's very generic and like straightforward, like go fly, take pictures, and video. This one, I can do all kinds of things, including setting up my flight path ahead of time, hitting play, and I'm not touching the joysticks if and until I want to take control back over from the automation. So I sent it around, and it wasn't great, but it did capture some things. I was having trouble with my gimbal. I don't know if it was a firmware update thing maybe that I was missing, but something, maybe it was the wind, but something kept tilting it back up, so I was getting those obliques instead of what I really wanted, which was the straight down ortho. And but in a few spots like this, it did work, and it grabbed what I needed. Now, what I'm wanting to illustrate, and I did turn to, did I leave it up here? No. It wasn't quite worth showcasing, but I want to tell you that I did process it using Drone to Map. What came out was not pretty, but it did work, and very similar. I guess I kind of did have the experience that we were talking about earlier with the enabled, disabled, or maybe something like it, because my flight path showed tons of dots on it, like those blue dots saying, yep, that image is good. Well, it probably wasn't so good because I know it was tilted, and when I ran it, I just had maybe 3 or 4 groupings of images that kind of sort of came out. So what I did instead was I took the ones that looked pretty decent and I turned back to my old friend image composite editor from Microsoft and ran that stitcher, got everything in place, and then came and georeferenced it. And I georeferenced off of the 4 corners of this building. I think it's a barn. I think the home is down here and this is the barn. But anyway, what I want to show you is that compared to, so we already know and have talked about the timeliness and relevance. This is like about as up to date as you can get, right, with the aerial imagery. But the resolution is also worth noting. So when you look at it here, you're like, okay, yeah, sure. But if I zoom this in to, let's go a little further this time in case we run into the same errors. Oh man. Yeah, this is the stuff that live demos are made of. If that renders, where didn't we leave the other one rendering something? Where was that? Oh no, it was this same MXD, just a different area. Well, I'm going to tell you what I was able to make out when this actually worked. This is now down to 1 to 250, and you can see that the generic Esri aerial base map is pretty blurry, right? There's not a whole lot you're going to be able to make out from that, other than that there's that's a pretty safe bet. There's a structure there, right? On this other one, I was able to make out like feed buckets that were sitting next to hay bales. And very clearly, like you could see exactly what the shape was. You knew that it was some sort of feed bucket. Also, those big, they look like, you know, old-fashioned bathtubs from the 1800s, right? Forgive me, I didn't grow up on a farm, but I love learning about farming. And yeah, one of those like watering tubs, I guess it is, of some sort. Was able to easily make that out, as you can imagine, if I could make out a little bucket about yay big. So the detail that you can make out from this, again, the timeliness is great, but from an emergency management standpoint, being able to make out that level of detail from an air photo is also potentially very useful to the responders, to also the recovery team, right? That there may be uses for determining exactly what things looked like, and I'm betting insurance would want it too, but they can fly their own stuff, right? So anyway, I apologize. This is very unfortunate that this part is not working, because even though all it was that strip of you know, road and homes that you saw in the first one, it when zoomed in, I wonder if I turned that one off. Ah, sweet. There's the bucket. So you see how relatively like crisp this is compared to, let's do this right. We'll turn you off and you back on. Yeah. Nothing, right? Like literally nothing versus this. So there's that bathtub. I don't know what it's called. My apologies. Is it just a trough? Yeah. I don't know either. But I'm going to pan around so you can kind of see the stuff I can see, right? Imagine when you're trying to figure out damage assessment and recovery and things of that nature. This potentially, one of the things that we talked about as we were putting this together, one of the benefits is these are sometimes zones that you, unless you are like credentialed to do search and rescue, think about a tornado. We've had one or two, but that we know that they can happen in Utah. Think about like being able to still do some damage assessment of your own. They're obviously looking for life safety issues, but you could send a drone in and capture this imagery and start looking at and assessing the damage this way before you're even allowed to step foot in the hot zone, right? That's another benefit of, you know, the drones. This one, I want to reiterate that, you know, this, it in this case, because I was having some issues with my data capture, my data wasn't as clean, but, you know, there are workarounds, and all I did was use that composite editor. Now, I keep preaching that because I really like it. Microsoft took it offline. Like, you can't, they took the download button off of their site, and then they have a note there saying we no longer offer this. So you can find it in like you know, those web archive sites. If you do enough Googling, you can find it if you are interested in checking that out, because it really is kind of cool. It does, as I said, panoramas as well. And I might have been able to fly it as a video instead of interval still shots. So instead of having to stitch it together, it just would take that video and kind of create, I mean, it's still more or less stitching, but so there are workarounds. I'm sure there are other like image stitchers, processors out there that, does anyone use anything that comes to mind? Have you done anything with this? Yeah.
We use Drone Deploy, and it works really well. You set it up where you want to shoot it, and like you were saying, if you want to capture 3D, you can set a setting that it will do more detailed routing, and in a way that it captures, it'll change your camera to capture those different 3Ds so you can get really good.
Oh, cool. And that's all with drone.
Yeah. So you set it off, it flies automatically, and then when you're done, you send all those points to the cloud, and it sends you a file when it's all done putting it together. You can look at it in their browser setting, but also I've brought it into ArcGIS Online and used it in that setting as well.
Nice. Okay, and for those online, that was called Drone Deploy?
Yes.
Drone Deploy. Is it, does it have a subscription or like a cost? What is it?
We have a basic package, and it is $1,000 a year.
Okay. So, if I remember right, it's maybe a little, at $1,000 a year, again, for those online. I think that's a little bit less expensive than Drone to Map. And yeah, obviously there are things that, you can do to shop around and kind of check these sorts of things out. But you're saying it does some of the stitching as well, right?
Yes, it does
Obviously.
all the processing
Yeah.
for you. You just send out your images to their cloud, and it does all the rest, and it sends you the finished product.
Cool. Yeah. Oh, yeah, Will.
I use OpenDroneMap, and it has all the functionality that you've outlined here, but it's free.
Okay, sweet. So Open Drone Map is what was shared there, and being open, it's free and has the same functionality. So that's really good to know, because again, especially in a pinch, you're maybe not getting that license or making that purchase if you're trying to support some sort of response effort. In a pinch, some of these things I think could potentially be really good information to have. So yeah, let's see, how are we doing? We're getting close, but I think, yeah, are there any other questions or comments? I think we're at a good place where we could take questions and comments if you have any. Yeah.
A couple comments. So Drone to Map actually runs on Pix4d,
Mm-hmm.
two different companies. So you can either go with Pix4d or you can go with Drone to Map. And then
Can I reiterate that before your second one for those online? So the comment was that Drone to Map its processing abilities are basically built on Pix4d, and as such, Pix4d also a good product. I looked into that in a different job and scenario, and yeah, it will do the same things. So yeah, Pix4d is an option as well. And then your second.
Well, and I just got reminded that Esri is going away from Pix4d. They were originally, it was just Esri changed the skin of Pix4d and was using the same thing, but they are going to go away from Pix4d and have their own. But the other one that I use for an app, I use Pix4d Capture and then Map Pilot to set my flights. And both of those are free apps
Oh.
you can use, and they interface with your drones. You go in, you set your flights. A lot of your image quality has to do with your overlap, your height, your accuracy of the GPS unit within your drone, and of course the condition of the weather, whether or not your drone is gimbal is able to center or not. So you get every so.
Yeah, great. That's good to know. I'll try to reiterate some of that, and you'll have to help me. But a lot of the end of the comment there was that a lot of the output inputs depend on, it's garbage in, garbage out, right? If you put good data in, you're going to get a better product out clearly. So sometimes, the GPS in your drone, if it's not quite as accurate or properly calibrated, that could have an effect on the quality. What were some of the other items there that you mentioned?
So the two apps that I used.
Oh yeah.
Was, let me get back to them, Pix4d Capture.
So Pix4d Capture.
Yep, that's an app that you can load on your device.
Okay.
That interfaces with your drone. Now that won't work for a drone that has its own like command center. This is the one that you Bluetooth or connect to.
Okay.
A phone or a tablet. And then.
So I'll just, sorry, it's kind of weird, but for the benefit of those online, the Pix4d Capture, right? Pix4d Capture won't work with a drone that has its own like flight planning interface built in. It's really for the ones that are requiring a third-party app, but it is free, right? And if it can connect via Bluetooth, etc., then you're good to go on that. And then the second part of that you used for processing was?
Then it was another, so I used two different flight planners.
Okay.
Depending on, I guess, whatever way I feel like.
Oh.
And then, MapPilot Pro does the same thing. It's a flight planner.
Okay.
For image processing, I use Drone to Map.
Oh, okay.
MapPilot Pro.
Thank you. MapPilot Pro is also a flight planner, and but you are doing the processing, whether you use Pix4d Capture or MapPilot Pro to plan out your flight, just depending on what you had for breakfast that morning. That you're still using Drone to Map to do the processing and get these awesome products. Okay. Or Pix4d. Yep. Cool. Very good. Thank you. Sorry for the back and forth. It's a little tricky with the online. Okay. Any?
For the online crew that Pix4d is going away.
Oh, that's right. Thank you, Sean. So Sean mentioned, and I had heard this as well. Yeah. So in your comment, you said that Esri is moving away from Pix4d for its like back-end processing on Drone to Map, and I don't know if they'll keep the same name and just alter the back end of it with whatever direction they're going in, or if we'll just end up with like another product with a new name, new and improved Drone to Map 2.0. No, I don't know, but yeah, that's good to note. Okay, any other questions or comments? If not, thank you so much for coming and spending some time with us, as there are several of our UMET members in here, and hopefully this you never know, might come in handy in day-to-day, and that's the exercising portion of emergency management and response. Is you got to practice it too. So hopefully this has helped a little bit with whatever you're doing in your jurisdictions. And again, thank you.
Also, if I could add one thing, if any of you are interested in being notified of our future quarterly meetings, we do hold them in person when possible, but there's also a virtual option. So if you aren't on the Wasatch Front, you can still participate. So come talk to any of us and we'll add you to that list.
You can go to ujic.org/UMET. It's 2 T's. And you can find all the info there for contacting us and get it on the list. So thanks again.
Nice.
introduce you guys?
Oh, do you want to introduce us, Nick? Oh, you just got the word.
Chris McGinty, water maps, and then we're going to follow up with Phoebe Mcneilly on the dashboard.
Central Wasatch Commission.
What's
Central.
Yeah, Central Wasatch Commission.
Central Wasatch Commission.
That was just here.
Oh, was he this year? Okay.
Yeah, he's just right out there. Or he was. There he is. He's coming in. Okay. Well, yep, as Nick said, my name's Chris McGinty. I work at USU and Quincy College Natural Resources, making this presentation on behalf of the Water Maps team. We work with Dr. Joanna Andrawada and a number of other folks. And some of the people that we are going to be talking about today are Stephanie Dewar at Salt Lake City Department of Public Utilities. She's been a partner and a collaborator in this project as well. So just acknowledging Extension and Seawell, USU Seawell for the funding for this project, as well as Salt Lake City Department of Public Utilities. So we're going to go over a brief overview of what Water Maps is and just some of the analytic capabilities of the program, why it's important, why we have it, why we're developing it, some of the implementation and results, and then we'll look at kind of going forward from this point, what we're looking forward to do here in the next year or two or three as we're in this severe drought period. And you may have heard this, but it's official now that Utah is in the, Great Basin Colorado Plateau is in the worst drought cycle in 1,200 years. So it is dry. We do not have water. We had a nice presentation from CUP yesterday, and we kind of understand that we're in a pickle. So Water Maps is really a program that is being developed or has been developed over the last few years to help conservation managers within utilities or within municipalities really get an idea of how water is being used on the landscape. And this is just, we talk about different types of water use. We talk about who uses the most water. We know ag uses a lot of water. We know that, just generally speaking, municipalities don't use as much water, but they still use a significant amount of water. And saving water on the landscape is actually a spot where we have a lot of opportunity to conserve. So Water Maps really develops these landscape irrigation ratios. So it's kind of, we call LIRs. And it's a ratio of basically 0 to whatever that shows how well these different different parcels, different landowners are watering their landscapes. Okay, so we'll come back to this in just a minute, but let's talk a little bit about what Water Maps data integration involves. So we're using parcel data, land cover data, water meter data, and weather data. And one thing I want to point out here is that the meter data is something that, this has been done before in other ways, but meter data really makes this program work the way it does. So we have individual parcel water meter data to really make this calculation. The other thing that really makes this is the land cover data. So we have a high resolution land cover data set that is developed at multiple time steps to assess what land cover is within each parcel. So I'm going to take this off so my glasses are fogging up. Land cover mapping really is, like I said, a key next to the water meter data. And the approach that we use for land cover mapping, which is important here, is what we call object-based image analysis. And we use this object-based image analysis, which involves this segmentation of imagery, high-resolution imagery, because we use high-resolution imagery. So we're using the NAPE data. Many of you are probably familiar with that because it is freely available. Many of these organizations and municipalities can't afford to fly new data all the time with multispectral. What that means is having that fourth band, that near-infrared band, so that we can conduct normalized difference vegetation indices and help ferret out different types of land cover. So again, the data that's used for the land cover mapping is really looking at the NAPE imagery, so that 4 bands. That infrared band is key. We create that vegetation indice. We use LIDAR data. Salt Lake County and various vicinities have great LIDAR data, building footprint data, road centerline data, and water-related land use and parcel data. So mapping within the municipality. So these are, ag, barren, developed or impervious grass, turf, that sort of thing. And each one of these, which we'll talk about, gets a plant factor value of how much water they should be receiving. As a side note, none of these methods of mapping are completely accurate. And so one of the things that makes water maps unique is this use of a very highly accurate 95 to 98% accurate land cover map. And that seems like it might be incredible. It is, because we have to go back once the map is generated, and you can see here, and here's the NAEP data, and it says before edits. So we enlist a small army of undergraduates to go through, look at different types of data. For instance, in Eagle Mountain, we had access to near map data or higher resolution Google Earth imagery. We can look at that, and then we can go in and make corrections where the application or the algorithm, the machine learning process, doesn't quite capture the land cover as accurately as we need to. So it ends up looking like this. We have a highly accurate land cover classification, and this is just a little snippet of Eagle Mountain City. Something else that makes water maps really neat is that we have a buffering routine that includes park strips. So that's important because a lot of you spend money and watering your park strips, and we want to make sure people get that credit for that effort that they're putting in. So the program goes through, looks at the parcels, does the best job it can buffering out, looking for the green space on the parcel and the sidewalk, differentiation between those two pieces, and then we can make our calculation for each parcel based on that. So some of the analytic capabilities of water maps, we're doing spatial analysis where we can show maps where overuse or good use exists. We're looking at temporal analysis, change through time. We're looking at changes in residents, so the human behavior of what's happening within the parcel. And that's really important because what we can do in this application we're developing is through city records find out, or municipal records, find out where ownership has changed. And you'll see this, they're doing great, ownership changes, and suddenly they're using water off the charts, or the other way around. And so that's a nice way to really address some of these issues. Where we can save water, comparisons of water use patterns, monitoring tools to assess programs and effectiveness, so your conservation programming, is it being effective, and just doing some realistic assessments based on the actual water used. So we have two phases of Salt Lake City. Actually, we just got funded for another phase, which is awesome. We're excited to get working on this. We initiated this, in the 2014 to 2015 time range initially, and started developing the idea, and then worked through up to phase 2, which we just completed, and we'll be going into phase 3, which is really the implementation of this application within the conservation planning method. So those of you that know Salt Lake City Department of Utility service area know it's not just Salt Lake City. It includes a number of different communities or parts of them within the greater Salt Lake area. It's not a small spot, and they make many connections. I will say the municipal connections alone, residential connections are greater than 75,000, and I can't remember how many total connections there are. How many? 92,000. So, see, had Nick here. We run this program, and this chart can be a little intimidating and a little confusing until you start looking at it. So the blue bar on the left of each one of those years is showing the total measured reference evapotranspiration. So we're looking at April through October, and that's the total ET, which is a critical component of the application. Now the green bars, if you look at the legend up at the top right there, you'll see that we have a couple of different types of land cover. So just grass, shrubs, and sparse vegetation. So that's those next 3 bars, okay? And that's just showing inches of water that those should actually be using. Now the orange and the light blue that you can't see very well are actually showing the average use versus the average need of land cover within parcels in the city. Okay, so these are residential parcels. But what you're seeing here, and it's really easy once you start looking through the bars, is that in all cases, in all years, some years more than others, residents are using more water on their landscape than the landscape needs based on ET and the different types of inputs that we give the model. And so this is a bit of a problem. It's a problem in the sense that they're using too much water, but it's also a problem in how do we understand why they're doing this and implementing conservation plans to mitigate for this and educate people. So just a couple of other results here. Another thing with a lot of bars on it, but it makes sense once you start looking at it. So these different colors are just different years. This is the landscape irrigation ratio up here, and this is 1. If you're meeting 1, you're doing a great job. If you're above it, you're watering too much. If you're below it, you're conserving water. we won't say you're doing bad because you're actually conserving water, but you may have some reason that you're not putting much water on your landscape or something's going on. But what we had always hypothesized was that people started watering too early in the year. And what this analysis is showing is people don't actually start watering too early. They water too much when it gets hot, which is, makes sense. Logically, it gets hot, you start watering. And so you can see that we go over our average LIRs, starting basically in June and going all the way through October. And so, we don't have the front end, but we do have them watering too long as well. So even October and November. And so that's when you educate, okay, you can stop watering now. Okay, you don't need to do it. Your grass will be fine until next spring. You're okay. But this shows us that, there is some education that can be done through the summer and into the fall. And then what we provide to the conservation program manager or whoever is using the data is really looking at this type of another. It's not confusing once you spend a minute looking at it, but really, if you look at that category 1 in the upper right, that's high volume, high LIR. So they're using a lot and they're using too much, right? So it's not just that they're using, how do I say it? They're not just using a lot in general, but they're just using too much for the land cover that they have within their parcel. And so each one of those quadrants, we can then take each parcel and kind of fit into that based on their tier, their LIR, and we also include the volume and the by pricing tier of metered water data there. So able to categorize that pretty well. Salt Lake has taken this and done some great things. They've created some story maps with it. They're starting to build in some educational opportunities. And what we're going to be doing coming up in just the next few weeks is some focus groups, working with people to generate reports. So this has been done in a couple of places around the state already, but generating customized reports that a person would get either by logging in or getting something in the mail. So we're working on that so that they can see what their particular parcel is doing and how they're watering and what their historic time of water use looks like. Now I should mention that the meter data is all proprietary to the service area, to Salt Lake City Department of Public Utilities, and so none of this gets shared out to the public, right? And we can make general assessments like we just talked about here, but that data really is tied right to the person who is the owner of the parcel. Okay, so it's just stepping over to Eagle Mountain City a little bit. We all know Eagle Mountain City is growing. I think last census was 11,000% over the last decade or something. I mean, they are now the second. No, I guess it was 5,000. There's another community that's actually grown a little more than them, but in general they have grown a significant amount, and they don't have much water. But they have a lot of data centers, and they have Tyson chicken, and they have all of these places that are coming in using millions of gallons of water a day, and so they're really kind of hurting right now, especially with the drought, but they're still building out. And what we know about Eagle Mountain, and you can kind of only see a little bit of it here, but they have a lot of build-out area. They have a lot of plans for the city. There's only 3 main areas within the municipality that have residential areas right now, and that's the north, central, and this area right here. And they're still short on water, and so this is a big problem. But we worked with the Utah Climate Center and with Extension and other groups. We got a few new weather stations put out in Eagle Mountain so that we can better calculate reference ET, and that gives us a better measure of what's happening on the ground with respect to their water use or water use that they should be using. These are the areas that, as we separate them out in our analysis, so the north service area, I kind of pointed that out, west service area, and then the south service area. So this is the ranches, city center, and White Hills, if you're familiar with Eagle Mountain. So I won't go through the whole process again, but just a couple of things that we've done for Eagle Mountain, and that is done some irrigated area analysis for them. So we're looking at each individual parcel. We're calculating what their total irrigated area is, and that's based on looking at the different land cover types. This gives them an idea of how they can go and interface with their residents, maybe putting in trees, maybe the big thing is rip your strip, your parking strip. It's not always a good thing, and I will say it's not always a good thing because the more ripping of your strip, the more trees that come out, the more green that you take out, actually increases the urban heat island effect. So it actually makes the city hotter, and then there's more water needed. Anyway, there's a lot of problems with this, but we've had an opportunity to do this with them, and really just calculate, what is your total irrigated area based on parcels throughout the different geographies of the city, and then they're going out with their trucks, with their folks, and actually looking on the ground to see how and where they can make some changes, especially on city property. We're also doing some landscape status work, so we're looking at when was a parcel landscaped, and this is actually important to us because we want to know when when was the house built and when was it landscaped. And most of these places actually don't get landscaped for 2 to 3 years, right? And so if you're suddenly seeing some big change in your model, like this parcel right here, why is this why? And this is just saying it's not landscaped. But if this was an LIR and they were using a whole bunch of water, they may have a water meter leak, and so they can identify that. We can work with the utility to help identify some of these other issues. So just kind of stepping out, and I would love to give you a demo of the application, the manager application, but because the data is proprietary, I can only show you a little example. This is an online portal. It uses a bunch of different services that brings the data in for the manager. What's really cool about this, and this little doesn't show it really well, but it shows, through time, here's the years over here on the left. Their LIRs, the next one is the need, what they should be needing, and then the use is that column, and then we've got a little bit of color coding there. And what you can't see here, unfortunately, in this screenshot is that the different colors of bars here, which if I was scrolled down a little further you would see, show when the parcel changed ownership. And so like I said at the very beginning, that's really important to see that that change in ownership so that they can work on new conservation programming if they need to. And just a few of the features here then of this application that we'll be rolling out with Salt Lake City and Eagle Mountain, displaying the LIRs, landscape irrigation ratios, just right on the screen, so they can easily identify areas, look for hot spots of overuse. There's some residences in Salt Lake that have used over 2.5 million gallons of water in a season, and that's a lot of water, right? So, identifying where they might be able to go and interface with some folks to try and reduce some of that use. And nobody's being shamed here; it's just education, right? So this is all about education. And visualizing these changes through time with the application, looking at these individual parcels, like I just mentioned. Filter and download, the parcels and the information into GIS so that they can create maps and send folks out on the ground. Of course, there's just some little fun tools to play with, swipe and opacity, but it gives the manager a way to really dig into the data. So with that, I got done almost on time. I talked really fast. I can't believe I got through 26 slides. I usually do this in about 30 or 40 minutes, but with that, like 30 seconds for a question if you might have one. Nick?
So like when you're looking at this program now, just with the issues that we're having on water, are they also looking at different types of grass? Like say Arizona type grass?
Right. Yeah, there's different types of grasses. So Seawell actually. Oh, yeah, the question was, are they looking at different types of grasses or different types of vegetation, right, that could be used to help conserve water? Yes. So Seawell, the Center for Water Efficient Landscaping at USU, actually has a ton of plots up in Logan where they try all different types of grasses. They're looking at how they do with changing climate, how they do with drought, what's best to use, and that sort of thing. So yeah.
Do they have any public interfacing websites or anything like that where we can actually look and educate ourselves? So landscaping our yard.
Oh yeah, Seawell has a ton of that. Yeah, if you go to their website. Yeah, if you go to the extension, the Seawell site, they have all that kind of information. Ralph?
Maybe a quick question, but are you also looking at how, two things. One is sort of comparing Salt Lake City and Eagle Mountain, obviously really different, but also Salt Lake City has I assume they still do the reverse rock, inverse block charging system,
right.
And how that affects water use.
Yeah.
So how different policies also affect water use?
So as part of my dissertation, yes, the answer is yes. We are looking at that. We have, okay. So the question, we're getting at is, there's Eagle Mountain. There's differences between Salt Lake City and Eagle Mountain. There's differences in water pricing, there's many differences within these two communities that we've looked at. And, you know, to get to that point, we're really looking at digging into that data. We're looking at trying to, you know, ferret out some of these differences. We know that Salt Lake City and Salt Lake City Public Utility, the service area is much more mature landscaping, generally speaking. And, you know, bigger trees. Eagle Mountain they're on poor soils generally, and it's, you know, it was all desert, you know, as of '97, right, when they incorporated. And so, yes, we're digging into all those different details and really, you know, trying to ferret out some of those nuances with respect to the data. But I better let Phoebe get up here. So if you guys have any other questions, please let me know. I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you. So next we have Phoebe, and she works at the Digit Lab at the University of Utah, and she will be our next presenter.
Thank you, Ebner. Let's just plug this in. Okay. So thank you. I'm Phoebe Mcneilly. I'm a research professor at the University of Utah and the director of the Digit Lab. And the project I'm presenting today, Ralph has already mentioned a little bit in the keynote yesterday, is developing the environmental dashboard for the Central Wasatch Commission. And this is a huge team effort, and my co-PI on this is Dr. Jim Ellringer, professor in the School of Biological Sciences. And then the team consists of Susan Bush, who is a postdoc with the Geography and Biology Department, Mary Pendergast from Sageland Collaborative, and then there's a cadre of folks in the Digit Lab that have been working on this. So as we go through, just a little bit of history on the Central Wasatch Commission's dashboard here is, as it was mentioned in yesterday's keynote, is the Mountain Accord Charter was signed in 2015, and in April of 2016, the Environmental Dashboard Project began under the Mountain Accord. So it was proposed under the Mountain Accord, and then it was awarded to a consulting group out of Colorado called the Brendel Group in April of 2016. At the initial award, it was visualized or conceptualized as a static report. It was going to be a PDF report, more of a report card format based off of the Colorado Heritage Program, if you're familiar at all with that, where it was a ranking system to see how well the environment was doing based on different thresholds. Development began under the Brendel Group, and then, as you're aware, is the Mountain Accord formed into or changed into the Central Wasatch Commission. So the Central Wasatch Commission on paper was formed in June of 2017. At approximately around this time is the project was put on hold. The development of the environmental dashboard was put on hold for a number of reasons, partly the transition from Mountain Accord to the CWC, but also at that time it was visualized as going to be a live and living document or a website versus just a static report that would go at some point to someone's shelf. So the CWC was formed in 2017, and then it took approximately a year. Ralph came on board about 2018 as the executive director, and the CWC staff got built out, and then then around 2019 the project was restarted. Because of the large gap in time between when it was put on hold with the Brendel Group to the formation of the CWC and getting it all aboard, it was actually switched from the Brendel Group to the University of Utah. So Jim Ellringer and I were approached in the summer of 2019 and asked if we would be willing to take on this project and work on the development of it. And we agreed to, with the one caveat that we would revisit all the work that had been done under the Mountain Accord and the Brendel Group and reconvene with the experts, and I'll go through the expert groups, and make sure that we were going to be developing something that we were comfortable with. So in phase one of this, we revisited the framework, met with groups of experts for the different elemental areas, and completed our framework outline for November of 2019. After that, we initially started on phase two in March of 2020. I didn't put that in there. Dates got too long on this. But because of COVID and funding issues, we were put on hold again. So really phase 2 of this started in March of 2021, and we just recently released the beta version of this, which I will walk through in April, and then the final version is due to be released on June 6th at the Central Wasatch Commission's meeting. So what is this environmental dashboard that I'm talking about? So it is meant to be a centralized location, more of a one-stop shop or a single point of entry to learning information about all different aspects of the environmental health of the Central Wasatch. And I'll show you the study area in just a second. And one of the things that also changed with the reformation from the Brendel group to us is that our audience, we really want this to be for the general public. So Josephine public, it could be a 5th grade student, or it could be a 75-year-old who's out touring in the Wasatch, to land managers, policymakers, technical users, so the whole breadth of possible users. So you can right there see we're already at a slight challenge, is because we're designing a product for a wide range of audiences. So there are 5 key elements to the environmental dashboard. It's air quality and climate, water, vegetation, wildlife, and geology and soils. And so for each one of these, we convened expert panels, and they consisted of government leaders, that they were experts in the state, federal government, researchers, and we met with them, went through, and asked them to produce frameworks of what would be important for people to know about the Central Wasatch. And so with these, we identified element measures, then indicators of those measures, and then the result of that are individual web pages that are educational. They may just contain narratives, there's maps, there's links to reports, as well as dashboards. So since we only have 20 minutes, and I've been doing these walkthroughs in about an hour and a half, we're going to look at specific ones here. This is what came out of phase 1 for air quality and climate. You can see we have it split to air quality and changing climate. Then the experts wanted a webcam link to the air quality index. And one of the main reasons they wanted that is oftentimes, especially in the Wasatch Valley, people look out and they instantly assume that if there's any visual impairment, that it's instantly bad air quality. Sometimes it's not bad air quality, sometimes it's just fog and others. So a combination of linking air quality index numbers with a visual so people can start referencing. Also a look at emissions and looking at vehicle emissions for that. And then for the changing climate, the elements were precipitation, drought, and water supply. And then those were further broken down with what you can see in this column. And there is a 4th row off of here, or 5th row off of here, which went into more detail for those. So, and out of all of these is they provided us the general types of information that we should be presenting. So also, as I mentioned, this is our study area. It is slightly different from the jurisdictional study area of the Central Wasatch Commission. As Ralph mentioned yesterday, the Central Wasatch Commission is a group of cities, counties, and you'll notice that these do not follow administrative boundaries. These actually follow hydrologic unit codes. So since we are doing an environmental dashboard, we took the political boundaries out of this and based it on watershed boundaries, and these are based off of HUC 12s. So I'm going to switch over now to what this actually looks like. Here we go. So as you come in, I've already come in here, there's a disclaimer page. This is beta, so we are making changes actively as we've been receiving public feedback on this. So you come into the website and there are your icons, which everything is branded throughout using these. So you have your air quality and climate, your geology, soils, your vegetation communities, your water, and your wildlife. When you go into these, I'll first go into air quality and climate. And we have a slight delay here on the internet, it looks like. here we go. And here you go in, and right away, this is the first part, as you notice on those frameworks where they were talking about webcams with the AQIs, is here we have 3 different areas within the study area. We have Salt Lake Valley. This is looking from the Browning building at the University of Utah campus. And below it, we have the AQI from Whittier School. These AQIs are taken from Purple Air, so the networks, public network sensor here. We have Deer Valley with one at Silver Lake, and then the top of Snowbird, and the closest sensor to the top of Snowbird is at Our Lady of the Snow. So it's a great air quality day in the valley. And then for those that are not familiar in the public with the air quality ratings, we have down below what it's color coded and what that actually means. Then you go into air quality here. We have general information on the background of what we're discussing. And then on all of these pages, or most of the pages, you'll notice we have broken down vehicle emissions, PM 2.5, and ozone and greenhouse gases. So you click onto these, and for vehicle emissions, this is probably one of the higher used sites, I'm guessing, and Paige, I see, is sitting in the back. She's provided a lot of answers to this. Is we have linked, so we don't actually have air quality emissions data, so we are using traffic counts as our measure for that. So we link to the Cottonwood Canyon's report, their daily traffic reports here, so you can see what traffic, and then taking the average daily traffic counts for, we have Parleys Canyon, Highway 40, Kearns Boulevard, mouth of Big Cottonwood Canyon, and the mouth of Little Cottonwood Canyon in Snyderville. On these, we have an integration of Tableau dashboards. So we've put in a mixture of ArcGIS Online and Tableau. This is coming out of Tableau. And you can select up to 5 different years, starting depending on this site from 1990 to current. And this is, we have here shown 1992, 2003, and 2020. And you can see the changes in traffic. And then down below, you're seeing for that same site with the trend lines included. So one interesting thing is if I switch over to Little Cottonwood Canyon, and I switch some data here, is most people really think that Little Cottonwood Canyon is mostly only used in the winter months. You can see here, yes, it's heavy in January, November, December, but then you see these peaks in the summertime. And then if I actually switch 2020 to 2021, on 2021 here is, you can see, and we don't have the full year for this one, it wasn't fully available, but you can see here the highest dates are actually in the summertime for traffic. And this date right here is October 3rd. That happens to correspond with Oktoberfest, and I believe I was recently told conference weekend. So this trend here holds true for both Little Cottonwood and Big Cottonwood, is you can start to see when people are actually visiting these canyons. So going back is for ozone PM 2.5 is we are linking whenever possible to other data sources. We do not want to create another data silo. So many of you will see references to your data and direct links when it's possible. And when it's not possible, we are setting up automatic scripting to scrape that data and bring it in. So for here, we link to the Purple Air sensor network, so you can see the whole area, as well as the Department of Environmental Quality, Division of Air Quality. And then that's for current air quality. And then for historic, we have created another Tableau dashboard, and you can again select different years, different months, and you can look at PM 2.5 and ozone. So really taking a lot of the data that is readily available to the public, but unless you have a data or a GIS background, you can't readily use it and see it in a very comprehensive way. So we've made it as hopefully as easily as possible for the general public to be able to use this information. Greenhouse gases, there's very little data on the Wasatch Front for greenhouse gases. We are linking here to Dr. John Lynn, who's in atmospheric sciences. his data, we provide information on the background, and then we have an ArcGIS online map for the 2 sites in the valley that are collecting greenhouse gases, William Browning Building and the top of Hidden Peak. And you can again go to Hidden Peak here, and hopefully his site is up today. And here is, you can change the time periods. This is for us time in March as a default. And then you can see carbon dioxide and methane. And again, as people think you're up in the mountains, it's pristine, it's pure. But one thing to note is that at Hidden Peak, there's facilities on Hidden Peak now. There's a big conference center building. You can get married up there, etc. So you see some of these spikes in here, and that correlates to activities happening on Hidden Peak. So that is an overview of the air quality component of it. For weather and climate, weather looking at more of the immediate, what is happening right now. And again, we don't want to create more data silos, so we're linking to MesoWest, which is run through Atmospheric Sciences, and their website here, which one thing is, it's very interesting, is when we've been meeting with the folks who run this, and we're saying this is going into environmental dashboard, they are actually in the process of reworking their site to make it more user-friendly, because it was geared 100% towards basically meteorologists and weather professionals. But then they were like, oh, you're embedding that in our website. We need to make sure things look better. So they're working on improving things as part of this project for us. So on this one here is, you can see the current temperature. You can change to a whole group of variables on this one. For climate, we break that down into precipitation and temperature. And again, looking at long-term, we look a lot at historic snow-tell sites. They have a really good, robust record for us. You can see this is Brighton, and we have 2012, 2014. You can select 2021, and they add in, and you can go through and look at different patterns and changes depending on where you're located. And the same for precipitation. So I'm going to skip over now to vegetation. And on vegetation, on this one is, we really wanted to educate people that if you're out hiking, what are some of the things that you can see? Where do things occur? So we come in and we talk about the vegetation zones of the central Wasatch, and then see as you move from shrubland to forest to alpine, what are the changes in the vegetation, and riparian is throughout all of those. And when you go into the map on these, you can see, and this is using land fire data. Here is the general categories of the vegetation. So we have it, we're actually zoomed in here. Let's zoom back out. Here we have those broad categories, but then as the user zooms in, it goes down to the species level, and you can click on those and know that this is aspen, and there should be a little picture that will come up. Then we go into more information here, and you can see the individual maps for shrubland, forest, alpine, and riparian. Then for disturbance, is we have it grouped in 6 different categories. There's insect damage, deforestation and replanting, invasive species, current fire conditions, historic fire, and watershed history. So if I go into deforestation and replanting, there's also a historic and education component of this. This is information provided by the U.S. Forest Service, and it provides the history of the cottonwoods and what activities have happened in there. So you can see this is Mill A, B, C, and D, and E. Lots of people don't really, even though it's sort of intuitive with the names, but don't really realize that those were active mill areas that were in big cottonwood. So you can scroll through, read about the history of it, what has happened, and most people don't realize that, especially Big Cottonwood Canyon was really denuded. People came in, they needed wood for building, they were logging, and so most of the original timbers in Big Cottonwood Canyon were cut down. And then in the 1900s, the Forest Service actually started a nursery to start replanting these, and that's where the Spruces Campground gets its name from, is that was the nursery for the Forest Service. And that nursery provided trees for not just Utah, but for the surrounding areas. So you can get historic information on this dashboard as well. If we look at current fire conditions here, it's coming up. We didn't realize until putting this together that Smokey Bear is heavily copyrighted, so we don't use Smokey Bear. Instead, we are referencing their severe fire danger mapping system. So again, linking to other resources whenever possible, and people can go in and see what the fire danger is currently for each of the areas as the map will refresh, hopefully, with this internet. There we go. As you can go in and see the different, where blue is low, then it goes to green to red. Again, looking at historic fire, using data provided by the Forest Service, and we have clipped this data set. A lot of these data sets that we are showing, if they are statewide, we provide it statewide. But on this one, if we provided it statewide, it skewed the numbers so much because of the large wildfires in southern Utah, then it made it look to a person who wasn't super familiar with the data that the Wasatch Front burned all the time, which we know it doesn't. So we have clipped the data to north of Utah Lake and south of roughly Ogden. And we have both point source data in here as well as polygons for the larger areas. You can change and look at the data, goes back to 1947. You can see these are all the points, 1947 to 2021. You can hover over it, see the total acres burned. This is 1950. But really, if you look at the last 20 years or so, there's, as we expected, there's not a whole lot of points in the Wasatch, and there's only a few, the large ones. This was the Parley's Canyon that occurred last summer, 541 acres. But there hasn't been a lot of burning along the Wasatch Front. And then down below, you can see the total fires and the total acres burned per year. So a couple things on the other ones is when we go through geology. Is there anyone from UGS here? We heavily link to UGS and the Utah Geologic Survey and their information, but we have general geology, structure and aquifers, going through soil types, disturbance. But as you look on these is another example of we're linking to a UGS. They have a great ArcGIS online map. We're linking to this because we don't need to rebuild something. We just want to be able to direct people to it. So we link whenever possible. And going back, I'm going to switch over to hazards because that's actually a more exciting one, is looking at earthquakes. Again, using a mixture of data from the Utah Geologic Survey as well as the USGS. We have all of the earthquakes, the points, the magnitude, and I learned quite a bit in this. I didn't realize you could have a negative magnitude, but you can have negative magnitude earthquakes. One of my grad students who's working on this brought to me. I'm like, your data's wrong. Like, something's up. He's like, oh no, you can. And he went through the explanation. But on this one here, as you can see, the number of earthquakes over time. Because of the 2020 earthquake in Kearns, we have purposely just made a note that says there was 947 earthquakes. Because of all the aftershocks associated with that, if we put that one outlier in there, it made everything else look like there was no activity. So instead of making everything else look like no activity, we have just noted it, saying that that's where it is, so that it doesn't really hide all the other activity. But you can see through here that there's lots of different contents on this one. If we switch over to wildlife and plants. So wildlife, we have it divided between animals and plants. Again, this is a great one because it has the best visuals, I think. Lots of good pictures. We go into animals. We have it divided again into mammals, birds, amphibians, reptiles, fish, butterflies, and snails. And for both animals and plants, we don't have exhaustive lists. We have asked the experts of what are the most likely to be seen. And like if we go here to mammals, and I know we have some DWR folks here, is we provide the picture that everyone wants to see. And then we link directly to the field guide. So if they really want more information, they can go to the Wildlife Resources Field Guide and get that information. And then, whoops, I'll go back. And then when this comes up, as the internet's chugging, here we go. And then for the species that have seasonal habitats, we have using the DWR, just linking to their data. Again, for seasonal habitat, you can see the different habitats and get information about that. One part that is also being embedded into this is PhD student in biology used camera traps to see where different animals were, mostly on the front side of the Wasatch, not on the back side of the Wasatch. So we have kernel density maps that are going to be added to this of a number of species that they monitored through camera trap data also. And then as we go to back over to plants, we have it broken down into flowering plants. And this is really to help people as they're out and about. If they've been hiking and they see different flowering plants, we have it separated by color. So here is the blue flax. We provide the photos. And then again, we're linking to information that this is the Intermountain Region Herbarium Network so that you can get more information about it. So overall, there's a lot of information on these 5 elements. If I switch back to here, this is the website right now. It's cwcedb.utah.edu. Once we hit June, it will be switching to the cwc.utah.gov. But I would really encourage you to go explore the site. Please, there's lots of places to provide feedback. If I go back over on the bottom of every single page, there's a link to provide feedback. Please go, especially if you have data that we have missed or things, let us know, because we really want this to be a rich one-stop shop for the public to learn about the Central Wasatch. So I think we have about a couple minutes left, so are there questions, comments?
Are you going to keep the comment section open once the final version is?
Yes. So, and on that, there's 2 components of it. There's a reach out to the Central Wasatch Commission, and then also a data resources. So if there's specific data resources, that will be, but those are going to be open, yes. Other questions, comments?
Great. Thank you. Thank you so much, Phoebe.
Oh, you're in for a treat.
So this is Stan Machinsky. Stan is the conference chair this year, and what's Kahoot the first time was during the virtual conference, right?
Yeah.
And he started Kahoot during the virtual conference, and it's been continued since it was so well received.
Okay, if you have the Kahoot app, that'll work, or you can go to Kahoot.it, and that'll do the same thing. If I can get this working. Oh, shoot. Okay, we're gonna, how do I get it to show just, it thinks I have two screens.
On the computer, you just go to settings and not extend. If you go to your display settings, and just say duplicate instead of extend. Just do duplicate.
All right. All right, keep changes. All right. So I don't know how many people can join at a time. We're just gonna wing it. So we're gonna play Kahoot. So this is a trivia game, and the faster you get it, the faster you get the answer right, the more points you get. If you get it wrong, you get 0 points. Okay? And if you win, you get to choose a prize off the prize table. Okay? Some of these questions are a little odd, but they're gonna be fun. And I should have. Oh, here we go. Wait. Oh, how come I'm not getting any audio? Oh, you can barely hear my audio. Okay. Also, there we go. Also, we're gonna have people playing online too, so they might win. Might have to. I don't know how we're gonna get them a prize, but we'll do something. They have a little bit of a delay. Okay, that's right. Yes. So you can scan the QR code, or go to Kahoot.it, and then it'll ask you for, I think, what does it ask you for? Like a name and a...
It asks for the game pin and then a nickname.
Okay, game pin and a nickname. And if you guys get too crazy, I can do random nicknames for you. Okay, so this first one will be kind of a learn how to play, kind of get you used to it a little bit.
I forgot I did play this one.
Okay, 5 more seconds and we'll start this round. All right, there we go. Some people last minute joiners, or I don't know. All right. We're going to play a bunch of rounds, guys. So. What does UGRC stand for? Then you choose the right one on your device. And it should give you the question. I think, does it give you the question on your device too?
It just gives you the colors.
All right. I know that's an option, but I'm not going to do it right now. Yes! Oh, we got one. Okay. All right, we got some early leaders. Okay, some of these are going to get really tricky, and some of them are going to be obvious. Ooh, but change of the leader. It's almost better to pause to make sure you get it right versus just throwing out a number, because you could still get points for getting it right even if you're not the fastest. Well, maybe you're not from around here. Is anybody not joined in this one right now? Awesome. Who was not here in 2018? Oh my goodness. Wowzers. Well, welcome to UJIC in 2022.
I was like trying to do the math.
We just had a UMAC class a minute ago. Who went to that? Answer the question, then raise your hand. Yeah, you went to it. All right, number 7. Here we go. What is Levan backwards? Navel. And it is the center of Utah, too. They have a high navel. $19.15. This last question coming up? All right, last question for this round. Maybe it was Fred. So, funny story. When I was doing merit badges, we were learning about trains, and at the end of a train, they have what they call a FRED. It's a flashing rear end device. And we always joked that my youngest brother was a Fred because it was the last one. Anyway, Allosaurus. All right, let's see who wins. Third place was Brianna. Second was Josh. The anticipation engine. That's you. Okay, top 2 players are gonna go get a prize. You can pick from something on the table. We got Josh and Jim, or Joy. They even have dinosaurs up there. There you go. Show questions and answers. There you go. Now you can see the question on your device, I think. Nader 3000. Color Country. All right, now you guys are getting fun. All right, I got 40. Anybody else? You can always join. There's a number on the bottom to join to. On the bottom right. Does this one show it on your device now? Okay, okay.
The buttons are a lot smaller. It's got a really small.
Okay. That way I think the people in the line can play like that way too. So. What? What?
I was gonna say that.
That was a gimme, guys.
The blue is right there. Yeah.
What?
The blue is right.
Oh. No, it wasn't. Whoa. Well played. Well played.
Start out strong, can't finish.
Nice. Ooh, that's a thinning the herd question, right? Ooh, big change, big change. Changing again. Do you guys know how hard it is to find questions and wrong answers for Kahoot? You guys just read the first one only, didn't you? What is this? Apatosaurus. Now you will look extra smart when you go to Dinosaur National Monument. Okay, last question this round. for a mission. Oops. All right, come claim your prizes. Let's see, these are going. All right, I'm gonna go with top 3 because these are running a little bit longer than I thought. So I got at the end of noon, right? All right, we'll go top 3. Get some prizes taken care of. Whoever was third that first round, you can get a prize too if you want. All right. Geo guy. Who's Geo guy? And who's Thunder Lizard? Nice. Those were the actual names of the Allosaurus and the Brontosaurus. That's what they meant. And the Brontosaurus was incorrectly named, and they changed it all to Allosaurus. I think that's what it was. All right. Oh no!
I saw the 84 and I jumped.
Dead serious, there's a buoy there.
No way it's exactly on.
Yep. Oh, good thing I didn't put cornhole on here. Or pickleball. But this is like at all UJIT conferences. Whoever put frisbee doesn't play mini golf with us. Just checking, guys. I don't know. Interesting. The actual answer is false, but guys, it doesn't always need a north arrow. Look at the previous map we just had of the whole world. That didn't need a north arrow.
needs to glue a penny inside the trophy.
Oh wait, yeah, it's pretty speedy.
There we go. Man, no changes on the top for a little bit, huh? It's either Diplodocus or Diplodocus.
My brain had to for a second. I was like, pronunciation.
Wow, okay. So, it's really Diplodocus. For my entire life, I think I've said Diplodocus.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Did you not like dinosaurs when you were growing up?
That's how I learned how to say it. I learned it's Diplodocus.
Well, 50% of us have said the same.
I know,
Yeah.
half and half. So we're.
It's like, y'all must not like dinosaurs when you were little, and or your kids didn't watch Dinosaur Train. I watched Dinosaur Train so many times, I can't even. So that must be why I know how to say my children.
All right, come claim your prizes. Okay, you're fine. I think I forgot to show the questions on that quiz, didn't I? On the app. Did the question show up? Oh.
Everything is showing up right now.
Okay, good. Was 1 through 3, top 3, were they here for that last one? Did anyone online? They went in?
Not so far.
Okay, so all 3 of you guys were here? Okay. Oh, nice. Are you Diplodocus now? Who's Diplodocus? I'm going to say it Diplodocus because I want to.
I like the emoji.
Jason. Yes! Jack is with us!
He's online.
Okay, 5 seconds. Oh, go. You can always still join, but there's a number on the bottom right of the screen. You can count them if you want. Mr. Emoji over there. Who's emoji person? The question is showing up on the app, right? Too, like.
Yes.
Okay. guys got to get this one. It's a freebie. It was a freebie, guys. Combined. All right, number 8. This is a true story, by the way. Not Guitar Hero. Bon Jovi. Yeah. It's true. Wikipedia told me so. It's got to be Alan Grant, right? You guys know who Alan Grant is, right? Or John Hammond. You don't know who Jurassic Park, Alan Grant, John Hammond? Yeah. Way to go, Lindsay! All right. Emoji! And Homo Nuggets! All right, we're number 5, right? Yeah. Not Stan. Why can't I win? Yeah, you're good. Yeah, I better win. Whoever did that one better make me win. I'll win one. All right, here we go. Ready? I knew that one.
Jack couldn't do it.
Jack Dangerman better be the top list of this one, guys. Disappointing. So last conference we were in Bryce. This was right there in Bryce Canyon. What's that? I was almost proud for a minute. Oh, two people! Two people cleared too fast. You are too fast. Choose the correct answer. Funny known fact is it actually started off as 80 acres, by the way. It did. It's true. They were literally just laying there, sticking out of the ground. They're like, "Oh, that's a fossil." Literally, that's what happened. All right, last question for this round. Fremont.
Didn't know that one. I've read too many of the guides around here, and they tell you Indians did all the petroglyphs.
Tori, nice job. The Kyler. Oh, Rich comes through. I thought it was going to be not Stan.
Not Stan's fourth.
Okay, we'll do one more if you guys want to, or if you want to, you can go. You won't hurt my feelings. But we'll do another one, and I got more prizes. So, also, as this is loading up, lunch is a sack lunch. It should be out here somewhere, probably in the big room over here. And you are free to do whatever you want. There's sign-ups for carpooling at the front desk to Dinosaur National Monument. Pickleball's at 4 o'clock for those who have signed up. Dinner's at... So I think dinner's at 6. Well, okay, I think the museum opens at 6, but dinner's going to be like at 7.
And then the museum's going to see Invisible 9 is what it said on the agenda.
And we'll have our...
Is there a route that everybody's taking? Because I'm going to go grab my kids to go. So I didn't know if everybody was going to go to a certain place first.
No, I think it's just kind of on your own, explore the park kind of thing this time.
I probably start museum.
Yeah, but I would go... Who's never been to Dinosaur National Monument? Okay, it's awesome. You're going to go to the visitor center there, and they have a little cool visitor center, and then there's I think they're going to probably operate the shuttle. There's a shuttle that takes you up to the quarry, and inside there's a quarry there with a big rock wall with a bunch of dinosaur bones on it. And you walk up the ramp, and you go in and see some cool exhibits, and then you can go down and get right up next to the dinosaur bones, and you can even touch some of them. So it's kind of cool. You know, we like to spread a little of COVID. It's okay. It's okay between friends. No, but it's cool. It's really cool to see like the size of the bones up close and everything. And all right, here we go. We kind of did this one already. Triceratops. That's awesome. Underachiever. This is what's fun about this one. This session is that by the end of the session, you guys always give up some really fun names. At first, it's like, "Oh, my name's Stan."
Underachiever.
Oh, not very many people got it. It's not a fox, guys. It's not a fox. A honeybee is not an animal, FYI.
It's too. It's an animal kingdom.
Insects are animals.
Yeah.
Same seagulls.
Cherry.
Should be the elderberry for everywhere.
Oh, this one's 15 questions. Oh goodness. All right, for this round, the top 5 will get prizes. Yeah. I didn't realize. I forgot this one's 15.
That's total guess.
Guys, come on. All right, if you haven't answered yet, there's a hint on the flag. You can't look away, can you? The aspen tree. I think you guys only got that right because you clicked fast. You didn't even read it, probably.
Assume you're talking student body. Not there yet.
Yeah. And I purposely mixed up the colors, guys. Okay, last question. Ooh, double points. Now, look who made the quiz, okay? It must be BYU. It must be BYU. I don't know. Yes. And blue goggles too. All right, all 5 of you can come get a prize for that one. Thanks, guys, for joining me for Kahoot. Go have fun in the park.
Have the ice cream. I'm taking first.